Welcome to the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast with Lisa Bolton and Melissa Hartfield. We're two women who are artists and entrepreneurs, and yes, those two things can go together. This podcast is for the artists, the creators, and the makers who want to find a way to make a living creating what they love. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the And She Looked Up Creative Hour podcast. I am your co-host, Melissa Hartfield, and I am here with my lovely co-host, Lisa Bolton. Hello, Lisa.
Hello.
And Lisa, what are we talking about today?
Well, we've got our theme of courage going this month, and so we thought our topic for today's episode would be to focus on overcoming self-doubt. So I think when you and I spoke about some of the things relating to courage, we felt like self-doubt was something that really transponds all mediums of creative. So whatever your outlet is, whether you're a photographer, a writer, a painter, someone who creates digital art, I think anyone who puts themselves out there in a creative way has come up against self-doubt. So I think it would be nice today to sort of talk through a little bit of how, you and I have both experienced that in different, creative journeys that we've taken, and some of the ways that we've overcome it, pushed past it. Because I really do think it not only can stop you from putting your best work out there, but sometimes it can become so paralyzing that it actually stops you from even putting pen to paper to start with.
Yes, 100%. I think it's something that everyone experiences pretty regularly, I think. I can say that for myself, most of the time I'm good. I've been doing this long enough that I know that the next idea will come. I know that even though I might be feeling a bit low right now, that's temporary. So I've kind of come to terms with that. But I still absolutely have these moments where it's like sinking into a black hole. You just
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh my God, I'm never going to be as successful as this person. I'm never going to make any money. I'm never going to have another good idea. My work is so mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
All those feelings. And when they hit you, it can be like this spiral, like for me
Yeah.
anyway. And I find for myself, it is usually almost always wrapped up in comparison
Mm.
syndrome. It's almost always related to seeing what is somebody else is achieving.
That's the trigger for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot. And it's the irony of the social media platforms have created this incredible way to share your work globally and to reach new audiences and to, on the flip side, also be inspired by things that you never would have seen before. There's that voice inside that kind of rises up, I know. And I've experienced the same thing where you're, look at how far along they've come and look at how perfect that is. And it looks effortless. And, I've struggled with this for something I'm not even happy with. It can be really hard to push that voice down.
Yeah. So do you have a trigger? Have you found something?
I definitely think that the external factors are my trigger. So I would say I can be creating something, feeling really good about it, and I start to think about what others might say, feel about the work. So I don't even necessarily have to be scrolling through social media. Sometimes I just get into my own head. Individuals in my life, people like acquaintances, loved ones, it doesn't matter who, and I don't know why that opinion matters so much to me, and my default is to go to, they're going to think that's kind of stupid, or they're going to think, well, she's not very good at that. And as a result, these relationships are going to spiral. Like it's ridiculous when I say it out loud. I realize um, how just ridiculous the whole thing is. But it definitely comes when I start focusing on the outside world. I would equate it to, which sounds ridiculous, but I would equate it to sometimes even looking in a mirror. So sometimes I can get ready in the day and feel great. And then if I see myself in the mirror, sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Whereas if I just not looked and just stayed within my own head, by myself, I feel like my self-confidence is high and I'm feeling good. Um, but that reflection of what others might be seeing really rattles me.
Interesting. So you are more concerned about the people close to you, and I'm usually more concerned about the people who are not close to me.
Oh, wow.
Like, well, no, that's not entirely true, but um like the people who are
Like,
really, really close to me, I don't worry about them. I think I just the people around me are very supportive of what I do, even if
mhm.
they don't understand it. I I did have actually a kind of interesting moment a few months ago. I've been doing a lot of ancestry, my heritage, family tree research over the last few years with my family, and I've often felt like I was the only real
Right.
creative one in the family. But one of the things that doing all this research has I've learned is I am not. There's loads of creative
Oh,
people in my family, and I suddenly don't feel like the not the weirdo, but I feel like I feel better, like, I feel like I know where it came from now. Um,
that's so interesting. So it's like literally in your blood, in your genes.
yeah, like, I'm not the just because it's not in my immediate family, it's it came from somewhere. So I feel that that's actually
Mhm.
really helped me in the last couple of months. I feel like I'm not alone.
Oh, and so that part doesn't trigger any self-doubt. So to put it out to your sort of close, immediate friends and family, that
No.
part's not
No,
triggering
I
for
mean,
you.
it does and it doesn't. Like, I get more nervous showing my friends or family things, and if I have to speak in public, I'm fine
Mhm.
getting up on a stage and speaking unless somebody I know really well is in the audience, like,
Yeah.
that always makes me nervous. I remember speaking at a doing a workshop, um, at an FBC conference, and I told Ethan, my business partner, he wasn't allowed to come in the room while I was talking because it would have thrown me right off, but yeah, so that's interesting, but for you, it's the other way around.
Yeah, like if I could put work out there and shelter it from anyone that knows me, I would have a lot more confidence. But if I know that within that, I mean, so not unlike yours in that when I know there's people that know me, um, I think it triggers a bit of the imposter syndrome. It triggers a bit of like, she's not an artist. What is she doing that for? She doesn't have training in that, or well, I don't know. I just feel it's a little triggering for me, but I think that's gone away as I've gotten older. I just find that over the years, as I've sort of become more comfortable with who I am and my sense of self has increased, I've been able to suppress those self doubt feelings and really ask myself, like, does it matter? Is this going to matter in a week from now? 6 months from now, is it
Yeah.
really going to make a difference how the initial reaction that somebody had to some work that I put out there? I think if I'm happy with it, I've been able to kind of work through that, but I do think that comes a little bit with age and experience and practice.
Yes. I think imposter syndrome is a good one to talk about a little bit because I think everybody who's self-employed or who, especially in a creative field, can relate to that. We've all had those moments where we're like, "I don't know what I'm doing, like, I'm just faking
Hmm.
it until I get where I need to go, and I hope nobody asks me a hard question because I don't know how to answer it."
Hmm.
That's when I struggle with a little bit. I often feel like I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that really, there's many good things about being a jack of all trades, but sometimes I feel like, I wish I was just really, really good at 1 or 2 things and have,
Hmm.
like, this zone of genius that everyone talks about, and I don't feel like I have one of those. So,
Ah,
uh
it's so interesting, yeah, because I don't think like I look at, you're someone who I do look at what you do, and I think you do have that zone of genius across a lot of things. So it's funny how you're, you paint a broad brushstroke of being that, but I think, well, I think you're like micro, like you have all these high talents in these micro areas, and that put them all together. You do have that great genius depth. So it's interesting how our own self-reflection, you don't see yourself that way.
Well, I think a zone of genius, so to speak, is also something that's really hard for a lot of people to identify because when you're naturally gifted or good at something, you don't necessarily it's something that usually comes very easily to you, and you don't
Mhm,
necessarily think of yourself as it being a zone of genius. It's just a thing that you
mhm.
do, and it can be quite, um, when you realize that that doesn't come easily to other people, I'm not wording this very well.
No, well, and I was it's hard to articulate. It's hard like, it quite, pun intended, that it is hard to articulate how you do what you do, and that was my very much my experience as I got into writing the book and creating these cheese boards that seem to stand out from other cheese boards. From my perspective, I really struggled with the first few workshops I taught because I didn't know how to teach it because I was just something I did,
Yeah.
and I really had to reverse engineer the process and pick it apart because I thought, I can't explain how I do it. I just know that that looks right to me and that doesn't. And so that's how I make them. And it was a very interesting process to work that backwards and find the words and the techniques and pull out what was I doing? What was it that made the work I was doing stand out from others or that kind of drew people in? That becomes difficult when you have to teach it. But I do think going through that process totally helped with my self-doubt because now I feel super confident walking into a workshop. I don't have self-doubt or credibility issues when I go in to teach something because I've become very comfortable in explaining and articulating my process.
Yes, you make a really good point. Teaching something is a really great way to uh, reinforce what you know. And I think what you hit on there is the fact that for a lot of us, when we are really good at something, it really does. It's just a gut feeling, and it is really hard to articulate it. And I think that's why we don't necessarily think it's a zone of genius because if you had to explain it to somebody, you wouldn't know how to do that, and then that can make you feel like you don't really know what you're doing, if that makes sense. It's like,
It does,
well,
yeah.
like, I didn't learn this in school. I don't have a degree or a certificate or anything in this. It's just something that comes naturally to you. So, um, yeah, I think quite often when you are really gifted at something, you don't even know it.
Yeah, you don't know it, and explaining it is can be difficult to how you come up with your process. I think that's through any medium.
Yeah.
But I think over if you can work through that process and think, I mean, I think teaching so and it's whether it's teaching a workshop, that first workshop, or teaching just your friend how to do that, draw that, paint that, photograph that. I think that can really help you um, push down any feeling of self doubt because now that you've had to say it out loud and you've watched somebody else excel or certainly even develop a skill in something like I just think it really feeds that credibility bucket inside of you that can help you, yeah, just push aside those feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the whole comparison trap because I think that's a
Hmm.
huge one for
Hmm.
everyone. Um, and it's related to imposter syndrome because I think often imposter syndrome comes out of seeing all these other people doing things really well and you feel like you're a hack.
Yeah, I I know. How have you managed that through the years? Like, you've had a online presence for the last decade or so and sort of in various forms. Like, how have you found that you've managed that, maybe where you were 5 years ago to today, getting yourself out of that comparison game? What do you do?
Oh, it's hard. I have really, really struggled with social media over the last 3 or 4 years. 3 since 2015, so 5 years actually. And in 2015, I sort of hit this late to 2015, I hit this wall of burnout that lasted for almost a year, and I really had to uh, start to pay attention to my mental health and all the things that impact it. And one of the biggest ones for me that I came to realize was social media. And
Mhm.
it is such a struggle because for my main business, social media is such a huge component of the
Yeah.
business. And it's kind of trying to find that balance of using it to do my work, but at the same time removing myself from it when it's not healthy. And it also made me realize just how much of eh, social media plays into addictive behavior. And
Hmm.
and, interestingly, I am not somebody who struggles with addiction tendencies. I never have
No,
been,
yeah.
and until social media came along, and, there's just so much wrapped up in social media for me that are just there's just so many red flags there. And
Mhm.
what I actually struggle with the most when it comes to comparison syndrome or self-doubt is actually following people that I know. That's the hardest part for me because I tend to compare myself to them far more than I would to a stranger on social media.
Right.
And so I have actually had to go in and mute a lot of people that I consider friends. Um, I would never unfollow them because I do consider them friends and I wouldn't want to hurt their feelings. But at the same time, seeing some of the things that they post is really hard for me. It's especially
Mhm.
if they're people that I've worked with or people that I have uh, had some kind of affiliation with them in their career, and seeing them become amazingly successful and having one of those days or moments where I feel like I'm not successful, and it's seeing
Mhm.
that and going, "How did they," "I'm working as hard as they are. Why,"
Right.
and then you can fall into this great big pit of self-pity and
Yeah.
wallowing, and that's not my normal personality. So when I start
No.
doing that, that's a big red flag that I need to walk away, or I just need to remove myself from it.
Well, how we communicate and socialize with those close friends has evolved so much. I think that it becomes triggering because in the past, you would meet that friend for coffee
Yeah.
and you would hear what they were doing and you could see them light up. And I feel like that would trigger joy for your friend or excitement. And there was a connection. It was a two-way street of, sharing information. And now it's this daily sort of scroll of these snippets without context, without human emotion, without watching their face light up as they're sharing whatever they're doing. Um, and I think that that is changes what it can trigger inside of us because we're not there in person with them. I've noticed it with families as once I became a mother and we would meet up with friends. We wouldn't say, well, where did you spend spring break or tell me about, because I saw it all. I saw everything unfold already. So there was nothing to catch up on. These friends that we'd see once or twice a year, I knew what the kids looked like, and they didn't look bigger to me because I just saw them on social media yesterday, and I knew that they went to Disneyland, and I don't know, it's like really changed that dynamic. Whereas my relationships that I have that are offline, people that maybe don't share either their creative work or their personal life online, I take away so much more when I meet up with them now because I'm getting caught up and I'm hearing it told through their lens. And I think that really takes the comparison game out of it. I don't feel those feelings I've found that I do when I'm sort of doing it all digitally.
Yeah, you hit a nail on the head there. Um that's one of the things that my brain really struggles with is when I see a good friend, sort of when you see their highlight reel on social media, and yet, I may have had a conversation with them a few weeks earlier, and I know that there's some crappy stuff going on, and yet this face that's being projected to the world is that everything is perfect. And
Mhm.
my brain does not process that. I tend to have a
Mhm.
black and white brain, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, this is perfect, but you just told me 2 weeks ago all this stuff that's not perfect, and, like, "Is everything okay now?" Is like, my brain just goes into it's like it stops, it doesn't have
Well,
a fire.
it can't
Yeah,
reconcile it,
it's just
right? It
like,
can't
"Ah!"
reconcile the 2 pieces, and it short circuits on that.
Exactly, and I think too, like what you said, like, you saw that holiday to Disneyland, but what you didn't see was the kids kicking the seats in front of them on the plane. You didn't see your friend getting into a fight with their partner in the car about how to get from A to B. You didn't
Mhm.
see that the hotel lost their reservation. Like, you didn't
Yeah.
see any of that, right?
No, but I feel like that comes out in a
It
conversation with
would. Your
someone, so I
friend would have been
feel
like,
like
"Oh my
ho
god, you won't believe what happened to us on this trip." Like,
yeah,
but you don't.
and you can laugh about it and share and, relate on the frustrations and then but also relate on the happy parts, but you're right, the highlight reel that we see, and I also don't wanna pass judgment on those that choose to
Mhm.
put the highlight reel out there because I think if that brings them joy and it's what they wanna share, I think power to you.
Yeah.
I think that's if
And I
yeah.
also, I know a lot of the people that I am close to who are on social media, it's part of their job too, right? Like, and there's a part of my head that's like, what you're
Mhm,
not that what you're putting out there is dishonest. It's not. It's that, I know that it's masking other things that are going on, but at the same time, the logical part of my brain is like, this is their job. Like
mhm.
they can't put all the bad stuff out there, and you shouldn't put all the bad stuff out there. Like, I am a big believer that you don't put bad things out there while you're still processing them. Like, talk about
Mhm,
them after you've gone through it and you've come out the other side. Um, but fortunately, my closest friends in real life, uh, almost all of them have extremely minimal presences on social media. So
mhm.
that is a few of them don't even have Facebook accounts.
Yeah.
So, I still do communicate with those people, through other means, like it's either, on the phone or in person or even just a text message conversation. And, uh, and I have a much healthier relationship
Yeah,
with them. It's
and probably less do you find that the comparison and the self-doubt stuff doesn't bubble up as much?
not even at all.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
What does that say?
yeah, like I just talked to one of my best friends on the weekend, and we had a good catch up via text message and just chit-chatting about, everything that was going on, and she's got some really cool stuff happening, and it was like, um, like it was great. I was so happy to talk to her, and I
Mhm.
was so happy to have a catch up, and it didn't even click in my head like, "Oh my god, she's this is working really well for her. Why isn't my life going well?"
Yeah,
It was just
yeah,
like,
right?
"That's awesome," so it's, um
I think it's a good strategy to employ, like, I think, maybe muting some of the triggering people or profiles or what it is for you in that space. And then you could always pop in and check up what they're doing. I've
yes, and I
several
do.
as well that I kind of mute and sort of I'm like, I don't need a daily update. I think that there's some people I love. I just don't need it on an hour by
Yeah,
hour basis. But I like the opportunity to go back in when I'm in a good headspace to be like, well, I haven't heard from them. I wonder what they're up to. And then I can get caught up in when I'm in the right head space to get caught up and I can truly feel authentically happy for them and I'm intrigued and I'm curious as to what they're doing for the right reasons
yes,
and not relating nothing to where I am at in my life at the moment.
yeah. No, yes, I agree. It's just come down to learning how to manage social media,
Mhm.
and, one of the things because it is this fine line. Social media can be very inspirational,
Yes.
um, and so one of the things that I do find really helpful on social media is finding new people to follow, like finding and there's a lot of people that I'll follow for 4 or 5 months just to get inspired and see a lot of them are art
Mhm.
profiles and things, and then after a while, it's like, "Okay, I'm ready to see something else now," and so I'll
Yes.
unfollow them. They're not people that I'm friends with or even know of, like, they're just I came across their work and thought it was cool, so I don't feel guilty about unfollowing them,
No.
and that's another thing with social media, there's so much guilt wrapped up into it, but that's not related to self-doubt. So, I'll unfollow them and I'll go find a batch of new
Yeah.
inspiring accounts. And I also try really hard to take a look at accounts out there that are not related to what I do, but that are still really aesthetically inspiring to me. Because I think
Yes.
getting stuck in your own little space can really play into the whole comparison thing, the whole self-doubt thing. I think it's so important to expand your horizons and just look at what people outside of your space are doing. It's
Mhm.
very inspiring. It fills your creative well, and you don't get caught up in that whole um, comparison self-doubt cycle.
Yeah, I would really recommend people like I've followed so many food accounts for the last few years. It's just like all that kind of fills my feed, and I have been slowly sort of purging that and replacing it with a little bit more. We're looking contemplating a reno at this point, so we're
Mhm.
I'm adding a few more like interior design and the rabbit hole of incredible designers that sort of I get into it. And I am not someone who really has a keen interest at all in interior design. I just it's not my thing. I don't doesn't fire me up, but I'm feeling so inspired by these accounts and the connections I'm finding through those accounts that I feel like I've got this whole new fresh feed and it's inspiring me to do other things. Like
Yeah.
I love, I'm seeing the new, whether it's new color palettes and thinking, oh, it'd be really neat to apply that in a different way. And, I think people have said before, if you want to, be a good food photographer, then take pictures of flowers and buildings and
Mhm.
other things. Like, and so couldn't agree more that almost feel like those platforms need an ability to like switch out your theme. I just,
Yeah.
no hard feelings, everyone. I'm letting y'all go and I'm declaring, social media bankruptcy and I'm starting fresh.
I
And
it doesn't help when Instagram recommends things based on your browsing history,
no,
right? So you just see
so
more food
true.
accounts. It's like, "Oh, you followed these 100 food accounts. Here's 100 more."
Yeah. But I think the whole self, like getting into the guilt stuff too, like I think people have to get comfortable with the fact that they're not going to be for everybody and I'm not going to be for everybody. And that's okay. So
Yeah.
if I unfollow people and accounts because it's like, it's just not, limited amount of time in the day to dedicate to social media. And it's just not where I'm, looking to spend that time these days. It's not personal. It's me. Like it's not their work. It's not. And that's what I think you have to think of if people unfollow your accounts or you find that, you had some fans and they're maybe moving in a different direction. Like it's not a reflection on the quality of your work or what you're doing as an artist. It's that it's their issue or they're changing. And I think if we can take out some of that, because I think that becomes that can stimulate more self-doubt. So I'm like, oh, these people aren't looking at my stuff anymore, they're not commenting. That I don't want to spiral into, well, I'm not very good at what I do. Obviously I need to reframe that to, no, maybe they just need to do a refresh and they're looking for different inspiration, and hopefully that same concept will bring in new eyeballs to my work with new people. So I don't know.
Yeah, you just made me think of a quote that I read, on the weekend that really shook me, and
Oh.
I just found it. I was, I had posted it to my little mastermind group on Facebook, but, um, the idea was that if you ever want to ground yourself, ask yourself, "Who are you without the internet?"
Oh.
Like, if the internet disappeared tomorrow, your social media,
Yes.
everything, who would you be? And that's
Wow.
like,
I love that
is
quote. I
it?
need
I
that
know,
printed on my yes.
it just was like, "Whoa."
I wouldn't have all the answers, I'll tell you that right now.
No, no, and
Like,
I
my kid's
certainly did
science fair project wouldn't be so good.
and I certainly don't have the answers now, but if all your followers were taken away, if
Mhm.
all your links online to your website and your LinkedIn profile and your this or your that and everywhere that you are online, if that were all to disappear, who are you? And I think there's
Wow.
a lot of people, myself included, who would be like, uh, um, I don't
I'm
know."
gonna need a minute.
Wait, what? But,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it just really reinforced the idea to me that, there is more to life than what people on the internet are doing, and that
Is there
it's a good idea to
absolutely
go outside sometimes and be in the world, and I found this really hard when I was doing photography, for client photography, because I found, so often that I was seeing the world through my lens as opposed to being
mm,
present in the world.
yep.
And that made me back away, and it's one of the reasons I don't do a lot of photography for hire anymore because I just felt like I was never really present because
Mhm.
there was always this camera between me and the world. It was like a shield, you know? Like, I could go to an event and feel super comfortable because I had this camera in front of my face and nobody actually had to look at me or see me or, I didn't
Yeah.
have to interact, and that's not super healthy long term, I don't think, but
No, that's really interesting. Without the internet, because it's not even without social media. You're saying without, not living digitally, really. And I think about even the fact that we don't print pictures anymore. That it's very rare that a picture makes it up on the wall. A lot of this stuff does live uh, just in an intangible
it's in
format.
a cloud.
And
But nobody
yeah,
even really
and
knows what a cloud is. What is the cloud?
um, I think so. I'd really like to have Heather on our podcast to talk about, because I feel like she's a really interesting artist, Heather Travis, who really I feel like as a great embodiment of like having living out loud, but having a really like interesting digital present, but a real in life presence as well. Like I think she'd be a neat artist to have
Yes,
to talk to her about how she
she's
balances all that.
she's really good at balancing that, and she's made some changes in her life in the last year,
Hmm.
um, to kind of, I think, put herself more well, we shouldn't speak for her, but
No, I
she's
know.
doing
I was just
great.
we talked about living digitally. I'm like,
Yes,
oh, I think about
she's done
someone
a
who's got beautiful art that hangs on her walls and has created her real life space to reflect her
yeah,
personality. But yet a lot of her work is digital, and like in terms of you know uh, for pay work or whatnot. Like she has a big component of that, and I think she'd be a really interesting perspective on a future
she would.
podcast. Talk about how she balances all of that. But no, I think that's a really interesting. A perspective just to reset your life thinking about without the internet and what your creative outlet looks like.
Yeah, if you weren't
Um,
relying on all these people to like your work to make you happy,
yeah.
like to hit that like button or to make a comment, it just, yeah, it's a lot to think about. It was very when I read that, it
Hmm.
really did kinda hit me hard, so
I don't recall who said it, but I'd read somewhere before another way when dealing with sort of self doubt issues and social media is to create before you consume each day.
mm,
So instead of, sort of that rolling out of bed and getting caught up with the scroll and all the different things that are out there that actually say, before I take in anybody else's creations and content, I'm going to create my own. And I really liked that piece. And I applied that a lot when I was writing my book, is that I'm not going to look at my first thoughts of the day are going to be me putting my creative best self forward. And once I've hit my whatever my deadline was that day or what my goal was, how many words or editing some photos, then I could consume other people's creations. But to start first with putting my own stuff out there so that I wasn't influenced, that I was going in with a positive mindset, that no one else's voice or that compare game was pushed down because I hadn't seen anybody else's stuff. I was really starting the day fresh, and I liked that approach to help squash a bit of the self-doubt feelings that would creep up.
that's a really great approach, and it's something I try to do too, and I think also because when you do make that conscious decision after you've created for the day to go consume other content, there is a feeling of satisfaction knowing that you have created something today. Like, I think
Hmm.
it's very different to go look at social media when you are in the middle of, I don't know, like a creative block or something, and you're just feeling like you're never going to have another good idea ever again. And then you go
Ever
look at,
again.
social media, and you see everyone's having good ideas but you, and that just makes you feel even worse. But at least if you've sat down, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes, and just sketch something in your sketchbook, or,
Mhm.
just something, at least you feel like you produced something today. And like, yeah, and you can go look at other people's work and know that you did put something out there today.
Yeah, that was truly from your best, that
Yeah.
wasn't influenced, that wasn't taken a new direction, or wasn't based on a trend per se that you think, oh, everyone's going this direction or that, or this is
Mm,
the, like you've really just said, like, this is my interpretation of the art I'm creating today, not based on what's popular or what, I don't know, theme or brand like, it's just truly authentic. And I think that can be really healthy. And then, whether you choose to edit that, share it, discard it, or print it, it's up to you. But I think you're not, you're taking out some of those distractions.
yeah. Um, I was just gonna say something and it's gone from my head.
That's okay. That's allowed.
But yeah, so we've talked a lot about the different types of self-doubt that we've felt and dealt with,
Mhm,
and imposter syndrome and um, comparison traps and all of those types of things. So, how can we deal with them?
mhm,
What it's, I mean, again, compared to the last episode we did, I think one of the first things you have to do is recognize um, that there's an issue.
yeah,
And I mean, I think most of us can. I think self-doubt is a very easy emotion to recognize. Like,
mhm,
you just feel like you're hopeless. You can't put anything out there, or you don't know what you're doing. Um, but I think what we may not be as good at is recognizing where the triggers are. And I think that's something that's really important, is to really pay attention to when those feelings rise up. Like, what were you doing when you have that tremendous feeling of self-doubt come over you? What were you
yeah,
doing in the hour before that led up to that? And see if you notice patterns or
mhm.
anything. And um, I think that can help you decide what strategies you're actually going to take to combat it. Combat.
Combat? Sure, combat. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think taking I think it's okay to have the feeling and be in the moment. Like a little bit of doubt is good. I think it pushes us.
Mhm,
I think it challenges us to be better. I think it makes our work better. So I think it's not about fully eliminating the self-doubt. I think
mhm,
there's a lot of growth that can come out of that. But so I think sitting with the self-doubt and really separating fact from fiction. So what is real? I doubt the technique I've used here. Could I've employed a different technique? Or I've doubt the color scheme I've chosen. What would this look like in a different way? Or the words I've chosen in this paragraph. So I think there's fact checking as it relates to self doubt for growth, and then there's emotional. I think fictional, and that's I think the what if game. So that's where you're going through like, what if they don't like it? What if I put it out there and they say this and so I think if you can kind of sit with yourself for a moment and really um, identify the distinction between where the self-doubt's coming from and is it fact or fiction. I think that's one of the first steps as to whether you need to move forward or maybe you need to step back for a minute.
yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with sitting with your feelings. I think sometimes we try to avoid.
Oh, I like to push those feelings way down deep.
We all, I think that's very human. I think we all kind of like, feeling bad is not pleasant, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think sometimes you need to give yourself a moment to just really feel what you're feeling, and that's
Mhm.
something I am quite good at, actually.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I have always been an extremely emotional person. When I am happy, everyone knows it. When I am sad,
Mhm.
everyone knows it. When I'm angry, people know it, and I let myself feel my feelings, and it's it means that usually I get over them very quickly. Like, I can get angry very quickly. I have a very quick temper. And I just need to feel it. I need to be angry for 5-10 minutes, and then it's gone because
Mhm.
I've dealt with it. Like, I've just let it out. Um, that can lead to complications, um,
Making amends.
but it's very rare for me to still be angry a day later. Like, that's just not
Right.
how I am. The same with feeling sadness or feeling self-doubt. You know, I feel them. I feel them, and those tend to last a bit longer than anger. Those can last 2 or 3 days. I sort of wallow in it, and then it's
Right.
like, "Okay, enough of this. Like, I'm done. I'm done with this. It's time to move on. I'm ready to move on." And
That seems very healthy. Like, I think that's the
yeah,
healthy
yeah.
approach to
I
letting
mean,
it.
like I said, it has its downsides, but I think there's definitely some upsides to just letting myself feel what I feel. It's not always easy for people around me.
Yeah, yeah, no.
'Cause it's like, "Oh my god, she's depressed again," or, "Oh my god, she's freaking out," or, um, but the flip side is when I'm happy, I'm happy. Like,
Yeah.
I
Well, and people know where you stand, and I do think
yes,
those are
I'm not
very.
I'm not good at I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm not good at hiding
Mhm.
how I feel about things, and I definitely don't have a poker face, but I'd be terrible at poker. Um, yeah, so I don't think we should necessarily try um, to hide or to not hide, but to avoid.
Suppress or
Yeah,
avoid.
or
Yep, yep.
suppress how we're feeling. Like, allow yourself to feel it, but at the same time, think about where it's coming from. Like, be a little
Mhm.
introspective about it. Why when I was younger, I didn't know how to handle a lot of my emotions, like, when I would get angry or, I wasn't as aware that, um, losing my temper could hurt people's feelings. Like, but
Right.
as you get older, you start to realize, like, "Oh, hey, once I say this, I can't take it back." And,
Mhm.
um, yeah, so I do think you have to take some time and really think about who you are and why you're doing certain things. And sometimes that may even mean that you need to do some therapy sessions just to have a
Yeah.
professional who can help you identify um, things that can help you work through or give you tools to deal with these
Mhm.
kind of things that come up, because mental health is so important. And I think artists and creatives tend to we have a reputation, let's just put it that way, of struggling with it more than others, the tortured artist, the yeah,
Right.
and whether or not that's true, I don't know, I'm not a professional, but um,
Not a doctor.
but,
Yeah.
I do think it's really important to, be aware of what's going on and not being afraid to ask for help to deal with it if you feel that you need help.
Right.
It's one thing to wallow in self-doubt for a couple of days. It's another thing to get stuck in um, that mindset for weeks or months. Like,
Yeah, where your art and your output it becomes affected by it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And even just starting to journal those
Mhm.
thoughts, you're going to see patterns, like you mentioned before. Sort of, I think you'll be able to identify triggers, but you'll also be able to identify: Am I asking myself the same questions over and over again? Is the theme about the quality of the work? Is the theme about who I am and how I define myself to others as an artist?
Yeah.
And I think you'll be able to find those themes. And I after weeks of journaling, or when you get a bit of a collection together, you're going to be able to see what those triggers are, and I don't know, sort of be able to maybe stop them a little sooner, before they get too far down a road. I think having the outlet for them, I think I'm different in that perspective. I don't tend to wear my heart on my sleeve as often, I don't think, because if I were to self-reflect on that, I think I'm a little bit more of, I will sort of smile and nod and put on a brave exterior and maybe, go home and cry in the basement. But so for me, I have to have outlets that I find are maybe more in a private way. So that's where I find that, like, being able to write something down and then it just kind of gets out of my body, out of my head, uh, is therapeutic in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
because then I've acknowledged the feeling.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, acknowledging the feeling, like, just
Hmm.
and y when you acknowledge something, you take some of the power of it away,
Hmm.
just, like, saying to yourself, "I feel sad today." Like, "Okay, that's okay,
Yeah,
you can
it's
feel
just a
sad
feeling.
today."
Yeah.
Or y yeah, it's the same as, like, when you have you're having medical tests or something, and there's something wrong, but you don't know what it is, and it causes you so much stress and anxiety and fear and all these emotions, and then you finally get your diagnosis, and it may be something
Hmm.
that's nothing, it may be something that's serious, but at least now like, you're armed. Like, "Okay,
Yeah,
I
a
know what
hundred
this
percent.
is, and here are the things we can do to deal with it." Right,
Yeah,
and I think the same goes for our emotions, like
1,000%. I feel like we're so much more comfortable wallowing in the negative than just being at peace in the unknown. Like,
mhm.
that's our default, is to say, well, I'd rather just worry about all the bad things that could happen, when in fact it's just unknown at this point. We don't know if it's good or bad, but it's just funny how our brains are hardwired to go there.
Yes. If I ever had to give my 20-year-old self a piece of advice from my 47-year-old self, it would be to not worry about all the things. Like, when I think about how much time I spent worrying in my 20s and 30s, it was, like, so much wasted energy and
So much. It's so ignorant to pretend that we have control over it, of all these other people's thoughts or how people are gonna react, or it's ridiculous. Like, it's irrational.
it is. It's complete, and yet that is just how most humans, I think, are wired. Like,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah, we
women.
prefer the ugly, right? We're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, think of all the ugly scenarios that are gonna happen," and yeah, sometimes things are, when we could actually worry that it's well received, we could worry that people are even just
Oh, yeah,
indifferent, but
I
we
never
kinda
worry if
go
it's
to
gonna
the,
be
like,
good. I just
I know,
worry if it's gonna be bad.
we would never visualize that. But I do think to flip that, I also try to replay, what if what if someone was telling my story to me? So what if they were saying, "Hey, I'm just kind of trying something new right now. I'm kind of fiddling around with this medium, and it's not I'm not an expert in it yet, but here's my first few drafts, and what do you think?" And I think, like, most of the world is going to well receive that. Like, I think, why do I feel that everyone would, I don't know why. I just think of, why am I worried about what people are going to say, when I think if I heard that story, I would be excited for somebody. I would be happy for them. I would, want to see more. And I think probably more people are like that.
Yes. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, that's true.
We just get so caught up in our heads.
Yeah.
It's it's crazy when you think about it. And you mentioned earlier that, saying it out loud makes you realize how ridiculous it is. Like, there's
Hmm.
something, and you're absolutely right. Like, you know, you're thinking all these things in your head, and then you say them out loud, whether it's to yourself, but, like, actually the act of saying them out loud, like, whether it's to a friend or to the mirror in your
Hmm.
bathroom, and you just realize, like, oh my goodness, this is so
Yeah.
silly.
I'm like, I'm smarter than this. This is ridiculous.
And I think that's another thing to think about is the way that we heap abuse on ourselves, uh,
Hmm.
is 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 ridiculous. The way we talk to ourselves, and this is nothing new, I'm not saying anything new here. The way that we talk to ourselves or about ourselves, we would never in a million years talk about a friend that way, or
No.
to a friend
No.
that way about them. Like,
Hmm.
um, and I used to follow somebody on Instagram who was a lovely person, but she was so hard on herself. Like, the things she would say about herself to the world on Instagram, it was just too hard to listen to. She was so hard on herself, and it was like, she just wasn't able to see what a wonderful person she was.
Oh.
And it was equal parts heartbreaking, but equal parts, like, I couldn't watch anymore. I had to unfollow because I just couldn't watch her beat herself up anymore. Um, and I don't think she even knew she was doing it.
Right.
So,
Right.
and that's not a that's she's not, she just put it out there on Instagram, but what she was saying about herself to the world was nothing different than most of us haven't said to ourselves in our head.
Hmm.
Um, so I think you do have to not be so hard on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's about focusing on the journey that you're on, and sort of not getting in your own way with all of those feelings and criticisms. And it's amazing when you let go of all that, how much space becomes available to create your work
Mhm.
and create your art, and to actually be productive, when you just get out of your own way and
Yeah,
clear some room.
yeah.
Yeah.
We are our own worst enemies, that's for sure.
Hmm.
So we talk about a few strategies quickly um,
Yeah,
to help people get out of their own way.
I think so. I think that's a really good idea. um Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a few that we sort of have both employed, we probably both used and approached, as ways to sort of push down some of that self-doubt. Yeah.
So one of the things we had thought about is building a support system, and this was an interesting one because this is one that you struggle with for reasons that are in your head. Because I highly doubt that you don't have people around you who support you. I know
Hmm.
you have people around you who support you, and yet in your head, you've um, you've built up this fear about disappointing them.
Yeah.
And so I think, in terms of finding a support system, like what do you think you could do to help yourself create that support system from what you already have, or do you need to go outside of your immediate world?
Right. I do think that's a really interesting approach. I think going outside of your sort of those, they talk about when someone, sometimes when people are rising to fame, they're surrounded by people that just continually tell them how wonderful they are, and that, that can be quite detrimental, in fact. So I think creating a support system that is a form of positive um, feedback loop. So they're going to be honest with you um, in a supportive way. So people that are encouraged by your journey, and you might I think there's ways to find those people that maybe are on more of the peripheral scope of your relationship. So I'm not going to ask my mother or my sister to be part of that, or my best friend, but I think there are people in the community that you could reach out to, and I think this is how a lot of really powerful in terms of production, some of these masterminds. I know you're in a very rich and fruitful mastermind of people where you can really be honest. There's accountability. I think sometimes creating one of those is a really smart strategy uh, to sort of helping with any of those moments of self-doubt that creep up.
Yeah, I think we should do an episode on mastermind groups. I think
That's a great
that's a
idea.
whole other thing. But one of the great things about my mastermind group is we all have very distinct personalities, and we definitely have a few
Mm-hmm.
people who are more of the cheerleaders, and we also have a couple of people who are more of the kick you in the butt when you need it. And
Mm-hmm.
um, s- there's there's a couple of people who are very blunt with their feedback, and there are a couple of others who are still give very good um, critical feedback, but they're better at sandwiching it. They're better at the sandwich, where you say something
Yep.
good and then you
Something good. Something, yeah.
um, but yeah, it's such a great mix that we all really just sort of gel well together, and it's you get the support you need, but at the same time you also get the kick in the pants that you need when you need to be told that you're being silly.
Yeah, and their opinion, you value their opinion, you value
Yes.
their insight and
So,
things, so,
and that's
yeah.
important, is to have people uh, who b both understand the world that you're in, uh,
Mhm.
but at the same time, maybe aren't in direct, I don't like to use the word competition, but who maybe aren't in the quite the same niche that you're in.
Right,
Um,
which makes sense.
yeah, so and that's one of the nice things about our group. None of us are in the same, we're all in the food content creation space, but
Right.
we're in different aspects of it. So
Mhm.
um, yes, things like mastermind groups or just peer groups. It could even be just a group of local creators that meet up
Mhm.
for coffee with once a month, or um, go on an outing with. Just a chance to connect and um, share your stories together.
Yeah, exactly. I think we touched on it earlier a little bit, but that sort of that focus on the positive self-talk,
Hmm.
I think is really important when you get into some of these spirals, and whether you do that out loud, whether you journal that. Joanna Penn calls it grounding yourself in one's goodness,
I
which I really
like
liked
that.
that. Yeah, a lot, where it's just that sort of yeah, reflecting back on your strengths, why you're in this position you're in, why you're creating, the art that you're creating. In most cases, no one's forcing you down this road. We're speaking, mostly about self-employed and entrepreneurial artists, and I think that you're there for a reason. So, sort of reflecting back on even why you discovered your passion. I think that's a way to kind of remind yourself of how good you felt when you first got into the art you're doing, and those feelings that it invoked, and maybe revisiting that space, and it might help clear your head a bit.
Yeah, I have two little tricks that I do that I started doing when I was really dealing with burnout. One is in my um, daily planner, planner, whatever you want to call it, whatever you use to plan out your workday. I have a section at the top called today's motivation, and I fill that in every
Oh,
day with what's motivating me to do what I need to do today. That's quite powerful. It's just
mm-hmm.
reinforcing why I'm doing what I do, and it can change. Might be my motivation is to make money, my motivation is to help people, um, but I find that useful. And the other thing that I do is I keep a gratitude journal that I write in every day with 3 things that I'm grateful for. Um,
Mhm.
and that just kind of um, forces me to step back, even if I've had a bad day, and find something that was good, something that I was happy with. And that really does train it really does train your brain to find the good in everything. If
Yeah,
you're
yeah, it's
able
perspective
Yeah,
too
if you're
when you
able to
lose
do
it.
that, that really does change your outlook on things and make you realize that you're A, you're not the center of the universe, and B, it there is always something good that you can find.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. No, I like that. I think breaking down your creative process into other parts, if you start to fall into a little bit of like the imposter syndrome, like I'm not really an artist, I'm not really a photographer. I think I touched on it earlier, but that ability to think about if you had to teach somebody how to do something. And if you walk through that process, sometimes it can be a real confidence builder to really put into perspective all of the skills you've gained to get you to where you are today. So, a lot of artists, it's not just, they've taken a lot of baby steps. They just didn't start out as experts. They learned techniques, they learned different approaches, they learned what worked for them in developing their craft. And I think if you were to reverse engineer that, break it down, and even write out, like if I had to teach somebody something in 30 minutes, or if I had to teach something for 2-day workshop on my choice, like those are real things. And I think in, upcoming episodes, we'll talk about teaching your first workshop and doing your first sort of teaching experience. But once you go through that and realize, wow, I've really learned a lot uh, to be able to get my art to where it is today. And I think that can help with self-doubt in a big way.
yep, 100%.
Mhm.
Nothing makes you realize how much you know by actually teaching it to somebody.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think also we talked about it a lot in the first half of the episode, but really coming up with a social media strategy that helps you
Hmm.
um, deal with things like imposter syndrome and the comparison trap, and just feeling like you're not good enough.
Hmm.
I think that's so important. I really really do believe that in the next few years, we're going to hit some kind of wall with social media where people are really going to have to take a very good look at how it's impacting their mental health. I think we're starting to get there. I certainly know that a lot of people that I know are backing away from social media for those reasons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know that we ever even touched upon how, the name of this podcast, And She Looked Up. I mean, really,
Mm,
I mean, that was something that you came up with really in terms of uh, a few different ways to interpret it. But I know for me, one of the ways was looking down all the time at our phones, looking down and taking all of our inspiration out of our phones, out of our feeds. And what if we just looked up a little?
we should do an episode on the naming of, of this, because I think
Yeah,
there's
you
a
know what? That's a
lot
good idea. Yeah.
of messages.
There's so many different meanings to
But
it,
yes,
but yeah.
the very literal meaning of it was like, hey, look up from what you're doing and
Yeah.
see what's going on around you.
Like real life is
Yeah.
happening around you.
Um,
Yeah.
so yes, I think that is something, social media is not going anywhere. So we really do need to figure out ways to deal with it and work with it in a healthy way. Uh, and so I think more and more,
In a way that connects us, right? Like I think that's, it's about I get excited when I can connect with people. I think about challenges and ways of consuming other people's art that I never would have seen, or connecting with people. And yet it's become this great disconnector. And so, yeah.
there are so many incredible positives about social media. I don't want to make it sound like I think social media is a horrible thing that should go away. I don't. But I just think we need to get better at um, using it in a way that's healthy.
I agree fully. I think that's a really good. I think this is our second sort of episode under the theme of courage, and we're going to be talking about risk taking in our next episode. Also, a big part of courage. Um, yeah, and sort of how these all sort of tie together, these things. But hopefully, that this discussion at least gives everyone a chance to sit back and reflect a little bit and add a few more tools to their arsenal when it comes to sort of pushing down those feelings that can get in our own way.
Yes, and just realizing that you're not alone when you are doubting yourself. It is something that everyone else is going through, and there is some comfort in that, but hopefully we've given you some ideas of how you can deal with it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for listening and joining us, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. Be sure to check out the show notes for any links or resources we talked about in this episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please be sure to subscribe and you'll automatically receive any new shows we release. And finally, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a review, tell us where you're listening from, or just send a note to say hi. You can find us at andshelookedup.com or on Instagram with the same handle. Thanks for listening.